Have you ever wondered how the old masters were able to paint such incredible, powerful and realistic paintings? When they didn't have access to photography or all the online resources that we have access to today. Well, they did have their own clever, little-known toolkit, and I'm going to share 5 tools which the old masters used, which painters through the Renaissance up until the 19th century used to help them when creating drawings and paintings. And the great thing about all these tools is that you can fit them into an art bag, and once you know how to use them, they're actually quite simple to use. I use them, I'm going to show you how the old masters used them, and I'm going to show you how you can use them with your artwork today. And so part of the reason I'm including the 19th century painters along with the old masters is because many of my very favourite painters were from the 19th century. Painters like John Singer Sargent, Sorolla, Anders Zorn, to name a few. And I'm also quite familiar with their methods because I was really lucky to study at one of the few places in the whole country which was actually teaching the 19th century academic approach to drawing and painting from life. And that school was called LARA, the London Atelier of Representational Art, and sadly it's closed down. But all of these different tools that I'm going to share with you today were on the school's itinerary. And so today I'm going to show you exactly how you can use them and how they've helped me and how I think they can help you. And the first tool I'm going to start with is the clear mirror. So this is one I pretty much always have on me. You can fit it in your pocket. I like to hold it up, normally to like the bridge of my nose, so that way I can look with one eye into the mirror and I'm able to see the landscape that I'm painting and my painting. And the great thing about looking at your painting like this is you see your image in reverse. So it flips your visual field, and mistakes and proportional things which you may have overlooked as you're working on your painting will suddenly jump out to you. So it's literally like coming into the art studio and looking at your painting the next day. And I'm sure you may have done that before and you think, why have I painted that in that place, or why did I do that? Well, this is just a really quick way of checking that, and I'd recommend checking your mirror every half an hour or so, especially in those drawing stages. Another way you can use the mirror is you can actually put it on like the bridge of your nose and you can look into it and see your painting and the sitter. Let's say you're doing a portrait, you can see them upside down, and this sort of abstracts the shapes. You start to see the head in a different way and you can compare the different shapes, and any mistakes will just jump out to you. So it's a really handy way of avoiding any major mistakes in your painting. And I know so many really great artists I've painted alongside who have hundreds of thousands of followers. One thing they all do is they pick the mirror up and check the drawing in the mirror. So this is definitely a really easy one to use. Moving on to the second tool. This is a black mirror. So in the sort of 17th and 18th centuries, it was known as a Claude glass after the great painter Claude Lorrain, the French landscape painter. And it sort of acts as almost like an Instagram filter for your painting. By looking in the dark mirror, the colors are much more toned down. It's almost black and white. The values are much more unified. It's a good way of looking at your painting and at the landscape and sort of helping you simplify the image. Also, if you're, say, painting on a sunny day, by looking in the mirror or holding it behind you and looking in the black mirror, your eyes won't be dazed by the sky. So this is great for checking values, trying to unify things in your painting. But similarly to the clear mirror, by flipping the image, it can help you with the drawings and things like that. Where I studied, this was on the itinerary list and it was just called a black mirror. I tried looking for them online and it basically just came up with a sort of dystopian Netflix series, which actually coincidentally one of my tutors from my art school features a lot of her artwork in the series. A lot of the actors who are painting or drawing in the series, she actually does the paintings and drawings for them, which is pretty cool. So if you're struggling to find one of these online, another thing you can use is your mobile phone. So your mobile phone has a black shiny surface to it, and again you can use it in the exact same way. You know, hold it up to your nose, look into it with your eye like that, or look into it sort of with the side eye this way, or even just hold it behind you and then look at the landscape and your painting. But this is a really handy one to have. Artists used to carry black mirrors around in the sort of 18th, 19th century, and we carry them all around with us today just as a phone. So you can just turn your phone off or make some of the screens off, and then you can use your phone as a black mirror, and that saves you having to buy a black mirror. And also chances are you aren't going to forget your phone when you go out landscape painting. So the third tool, again, a very practical one which you can fit into your art bag, even into your pocket. It's so small, and that is just the Plum Line. So this has been used for architecture pretty much since the beginning of architecture, I imagine. And the great thing about a plumb line, you could hold your plumb line up with a straight arm, sort of close one eye, and see which points that line of string crosses over the model. Perhaps it runs down, from a shoulder, perhaps it lines up with the bottom of the heel. And by holding that straight, you can see those relationships. And you can also use it when painting landscapes, especially architecture, just to get a really good idea of what points line up with which, and then it's much easier to paint and reference things. This is one I've just made pretty rudimentary, just a bit of thin string and some of these metal washers. Normally a bit of fishing wire is quite good because it's thinner, but you can still see it over whatever scene it is you're painting. So Plumb Line, a great tool for checking the drawing. So moving on to my fourth tool. So a lot of people often say to me, I'd love to paint, but I can't draw a straight line. I don't have the dexterity in my hand. Perhaps they've got shaky hands or something like that. Well, actually, with a Mool Stick, it will give you a surprising amount of dexterity. You don't have to paint incredibly fine details if you don't want to. A lot of the Impressionists would paint much broader strokes and they create a really interesting and impressive effect. But if you do really want to paint those really small, subtle, fine details, then a Mool Stick is a great thing to have, especially when working with oil paint, as you can't afford to rest your hand on the painting. If the oil paint's wet, you're going to smudge the painting underneath, you're going to get paint in your hand. This one is a sort of homemade one. It's actually my studio mate's Mool Stick. Often you'll see them with sort of a sponge on top, like a padded cloth, so you can just rest it against the painting. This one's got a hook, so with this you can actually hook it to the top of your board if you're drawing, or the top of your canvas, like this. And then you can just rest your hand on top of the stick as you paint, and that allows you a lot of control over your brush strokes without having to worry about trying to balance your hand in midair or pushing your hand into the paint. So a Mool Stick, I would say, is a really good one. You see them in self-portraits by Rembrandt. The painter who painted the Painted Hall in Greenwich, I forgot his name, there's a sort of self-portrait of him in the Painted Hall with one of these Mool Sticks. As you can imagine, painting such a big area, you're going to want to rest your hand a bit, and this is a great tool for that. You can even hold your art palette and your Mool Stick and your brushes all in the same hand and use it to stabilize your brush strokes. So this is quite a handy tool. I don't use it that much, but when I was drawing plaster casts at the art school I studied at, this was a really helpful tool because the level of rendering that we had to achieve was really high, and if the drawing wasn't good enough, we wouldn't get passed on to the next stage, so we wouldn't be able to progress through the course. So this was a useful tool in just helping you render things to a really, really fine level of detail. Okay, so my fifth and final point is about paintbrushes. So everyone always wants to find out if there's like a magic paintbrush, which brush should you use, which brush did the old masters use, should I use filberts or flats or rounds? And the reality is there isn't a magic paintbrush. The brush isn't going to do the painting for you, but one brush which I've found has helped me, and the old masters would use them, Thomas Gainsborough would use something similar, Sorolla, there's pictures of him using something similar as well, is actually having a much longer brush. So this is a brush here sold by Rosemary & Co. And the great thing about having a long paintbrush is it may seem a bit intimidating. You may think, how am I going to have the dexterity to paint with a really long paintbrush? Because the idea of having a long paintbrush is you actually hold it quite far back, and this allows you to get some distance from your work, especially in those early stages where you're trying to get in the big shapes, the proportions. Having a long paintbrush, I find, just really speeds up the process because it stops me from getting caught up in the small details. I can stand back, I can paint in the big shapes nice and quickly. I can see the sitter, I can see the portrait, or if you're doing a landscape, again, you can see the landscape, you can see the big picture. So long paintbrushes, I definitely recommend them. I love using them. And I know Thomas Gainsborough, he used to tie a brush to a broomstick and actually stand on the other side of the room and sort of wiggle the broomstick with the brush on the end to paint in the sitter's portrait. I hope these 5 tools were useful. If they were, let me know in the comments. And if you know of any other tools which, say, the old masters or the 19th century masters used, Let me know in the comments because I'd be really keen to know what they are. I hope this was helpful. If it was, remember, please give me a thumbs up and do subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll see you in the next video.